Shirley with Spirit of Matter here in the astrology of 2024, and I decided to break it down into different segments that are going to make it easier to watch, so that you will understand what to look for in terms of the bigger things that are happening. And then as the year goes, we can do the astrology of every month and the lunations and everything. But when we look at a whole year, basically we are looking at, first of all, what are the big things that are going to happen. So the first thing we look at is eclipses. I look at, and I have done videos on eclipses of 2024. And then the second bigger things is outer planets to inner planets. Okay? Before the ingresses, before the lunations, before everything else, because the moon is going to go over those aspects. And this is a Sunday, Venus hour at the time of the record. Venus in the 7th house, 28 degrees Libra, squaring Pluto, okay, at 28 degrees. I did a video about the synodic cycle of Venus and Pluto that you can watch now on my channel. But this is going to be Pluto with all the personals. And the Sun is in 11 degrees Sagittarius in the 9th house, together with Mars, the ruler of the ascendant. And the midheaven is ruled by Saturn, with Saturn into 12th, actually. So it is, and the moon 21 degrees Leo, and is separating from a square to this retrograde Uranus. Funny thing for me, for the moon Uranus square, was that I not exactly launched, because it's more a completion transit, but it definitely allowed some sort of services in the local community after a fight I had with someone who was criticizing me for charging money for astrology. So, but she was not offering any neurodivergent option, no understanding of PTSD, no understanding of anything of that sort. And then it was sort of like a rebellion. I'm going to do exactly what she hates in her face. And I'm going to offer my services. But this is a very funny notion. I have now Mars here in the 10th house, this ruled in my second. So it was an interesting election. The sun was on Antares. Okay, right now it's the 11th degree. But it was not pre-elected. It was just like, I'm going to do it in spite of what you think. And we'll see. I don't know if people want to have, if I can give a reading, okay? As for international services, now, one thing I'm pretty comfortable with giving you is something that is not just astrology, not because I have a problem with astrology, but because I think that that's something that's going to be quite useful. And that is to design an altar with you. Not an astrological altar, but definitely to design an altar with you. I think right now is a service that's very much needed for people to have a person to kind of like sit on this, and you can do follow-ups if you want, or kind of like have somebody that not holds you accountable, but you can connect with on building a structure of what you want to create in your life. And with that, we can look at the chart. Yes, we can look at the chart and see if we get ideas for something creative, because I feel like offering some creative work, okay, some service and some creative work beyond just giving a reading. So I feel that can be useful. This is £200, okay? So it is a service that's for people who can afford the £200, but it's also a service that is meant for you to kind of open the gates of wealth. So to decide, I want to have this consultation, and I ask for the gates of wealth to open. But right now, as the moon is decreasing, what I want to concentrate is on removing the blocks removing the obstacles to the gates of wealth, and to make wealth in a way that is ethical, in a way that is actually supportive of our well-being. And that's something I concentrate on in my life. So if you would want to have such a consultation with me, and design the altar, doesn't have to be about wealth, anything that you want, that we can design it, and we can have a sort of approximate election. Okay, we don't have exact election, because it is a year. You know, the astrology will do astrology, but we find a good election for you to instill the altar and to what to put inside it, as designed to your purpose. And we can look at your chart, and gain ideas from that to do something creative. And if you want that, then you can already begin to kind of set intention to remove the blocks that keep you from having that, and see what happens in your life when you make this decision. Because by the time you come to me, where I want you to be is that you've already gained something from what I have to give, and you just want more of it, or you already come to me with like the dividends. Here, look, the gates of wealth open up to me. I did this, I did that. Hey, look, now I'm just going to buy, something creative that we can do together, or creative that I do. And that can be kind of like an honoring, and of me getting a dividends for the work that I do anyway. So now, Pluto and the outer planets. Without further ado, let's begin. So we have this one. Yeah, so beginning with the conjunction. Okay, so we have the first is January 20. Pluto has a conjunction with the Sun on Jan 20 at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And look at the moon. The moon, 29 degrees of Taurus, is trining this. So this is, it looks like quite an interesting, although conjunction is a hard aspect. This is where the Sun is kind of being reborn by Pluto, because Pluto is about birthing. Okay, usually something is born in the Sun. But I kind of feel like because Pluto is about the process of rebirth, then the Sun itself is having a little bit of a rebirth here. So in Capricorn, we can have the shedding light into the hidden structures. Okay, we are culminating with hidden structures. Who rules the world? You know? Who rules the world? Do the Jews? Do the Qatari? Do the aliens? Do the secret societies? Do the this? Okay? And now we are having a deeper look, and more light is shed, and more depth is being uncovered. And the moon in Taurus is trining this aspect. So and it's an opening cycle for the moon. So this is a growing moon, which is allowing us to be informed by those structures as we come, whether it's to do something creative, because this is the Sun that has structure that's supposed to stand the test of time, to be of leadership, or to discover something about leadership. You could be discovering secrets about your father or one of your parents, because Sun Moon is kind of like father, mother. And it doesn't have to be anything much, it can be something juicy, or just something that was uncovered, or that was hidden. With Pluto, Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces. Then again, Saturn in Pisces is still in the place of leaking information. So secrets are being leaked, but also missing information, people who are missing, um, refugees, the structure in the medicines or the holistic medicines. Or we may find hidden structures, or maybe we thought some field is not standardized, like astrology, okay? It's like, oh, astrology needs to be standard. Astrology is pretty much standardized. What you see, channels like me, channels that are not a part of a secret cult, of a secret society, then what you are seeing is basically the margins. Okay, so astrology is very, very standardized. It governing the election of every chart. Okay, but you see a national chart, but you see a international chart. Any election on a mundane level, you see the conflicts that you see today and the weird things happening in the world. A lot of these things are pre-elected. Any terror organization that you see, or guerrilla organization that you see, the chart of the foundation, the Declaration of Independence, it is all pre-elected. There's no such thing as astrology is not standardized. Okay? You need to understand this, because it is, yeah, just one thing that comes up when I think about it. And the same can be true to shamanic healing and all the things that people say are sham. One good study was when the CIA was trying to teach people to do remote viewing, okay? The classified CIA stuff, okay? I'm not going around, I'm going about stuff that I found, and I was writing this in academia, and it was academically approved. That this is declassified CIA stuff. What they were trying to do is to try and teach people what we call ESP, okay? And they were trying to teach them remote viewing. But a lot of people began to fail for two main reasons. One, they began to develop the skill, but then they failed. One reason was because they tried to teach it, it's a sense, and even in our own senses, when you continue to expose yourself to the same sense, okay? This is me, okay? This is going to be like this. When you begin to expose yourself to the same sense, you get desensitized. Think about, bless you, we also have it in aromatherapy. Let's say I give you an orange juice, orange essential oil to smell. It's great, it's usually very accessible, and it's deepening your breath. You could be a bit allergic to it, and then, yeah. But the thing is, if you smell it, if you sniff it, then, and you smell it again and again and again, then suddenly you won't smell anything. And every time you smell a bit differently. So this is, although with aromatherapy there's something a bit different that happens, but because it works on your nervous system and it changes your consciousness. Like your consciousness changes as a meeting with this. But other than that, you will see if you try to constantly sniff it, you will no longer smell anything unless you set it apart and then you smell it again. Okay? And this is what happens with also the clairs. When you do test of the sense, it's not a good way to teach. You need to give kind of like challenges, do this and then do that, and not to test the sense so much, which makes it difficult to gain a scientific reckoning, because that's just how it is, okay? We want to have repetition in science, but it's not possible with senses. So another reason, and this is why I'm mentioning this here, is because they were beginning to have fears. And the thing is that usually remote viewing, remote sensing, any of the clairs, clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, okay, to feel something, that was practiced by the church. And only the church had the acclamation. Whoever tried to practice this outside of the church basically was considered evil. Okay, any word that I will say, if I will say Luciferian, we know that Lucifer is also associated with Venus. Okay, and then came Christianity. If I say satanistic, we know that Satan is also associated with Saturn, which is just the Lord of Time. It's the accumulation of our uh, rest and action across time. And then it's kind of like, okay, now you need to change this, now you need to change that, now you need to redo this, or okay, this is something that we can't do change anymore, now we're gonna have to handle it in another way, and then there can be loss or even death. But the fact is that anybody who tried to do this outside of the church was considered an abomination, and people were afraid to study how to remote view. Okay? And then there is another factor, that is how do you use it? Because if you don't use something benefically, either it dissipates, or you kind of like begin to have troubles with it or something like that. And so when we talk about this Sun Pluto with Saturn in Pisces, we may find that things that we thought are not standardized, which is Saturn, are actually very standardized. And what they said is, oh, we need to also have standardization of the people who do this outside the church or outside this secret society. You must understand that that can be also manipulation, because this allows if you look, let's give an example with YouTube. There is a herbalist that tries to post stuff on YouTube, and their videos began to be cancelled for posting, like, just knowledge about herbs. Okay, and they were marked misinformation. Okay, so you understand what is going here. This is a conjunction that's going to shed light more on this, or on the topic of refugees. So all standardization, or the topic of refugees, and the hidden order where we thought that there isn't any, but also trying to establish an order in a place that's very malleable. Okay, like trying to test your clairvoyance where you cannot test senses, and it's just like, this is a sense, it doesn't work in the way that you usually study things scientifically. Now, let's go with, no, still Pluto. Do we have any aspects? So we're going to go to the square. Okay, I'm going to do it with synodic cycles. So it's going to be easier to follow the actual process of things. And the square is when the Sun is in 2 degrees Taurus and Pluto is in 2 degrees Aquarius. This is going to happen on 21st April 2024. Jupiter and Uranus in the context here are going to be conjuncting already, right before they begin to conjunct on the 22nd degree. So April 21. And there we have, the moon is trining this. It's earlier, as it perfects, the moon is trining this from Libra. So, what do we have? You have a moon that is aspecting Pluto from an earth sign, with Venus still in Aries conjuncting Chiron. Okay, so there's some sort of a wound that we are tending to. And the Sun in Taurus, square in Pluto. Square in Pluto and Aquarius. Now, Pluto and Aquarius, if you think about Aquarius, this is the, if you think in terms of politics, then this is the global politics. But it also, it's not just global politics, it's also the desire to have resources that are allocated according to some sort of order to the entire humanity. So you think about communist regimes, they have a lot to do with that type of order, communist movement, everything where we say all workers of the world unite, all women of the world unite, okay, LGBTQ of the world unite. And this is across nations, across um, political entities, across empires. There is a desire for a global change on a social matter that can also have a sciencey feel to it. For example, it is the prospect of our humanity to explore space and continue on colonizing space. This is also Aquarius, okay? It's this grand expansion, but there is order to things, and there is structure. Even though it seems chaotic within chaos, there is structure. It's just more flexible and unpredictable. Taurus is very territorial, okay? And it's also, both of them are fixed signs. So Taurus is actually very territorial. And Taurus, here in the square to Pluto, it can be where, in the name or in the goal of global politics, territories are being touched on, changed, or Pluto doesn't see territories. If you take, for example, Soros, and I did a video on Soros, okay? One of the things he said, it was, we need to put what we call the refugees, we need to take care of these refugees, okay? So the taking care of the refugees is the goal, and the borders of the countries is the obstacle. Understand? So that is where I see the square between Taurus and Aquarius, and this is on a leadership level. Okay, there is some sort of political power that desires to do something on a global level, and whether it's right or wrong, there is a conflict with the leaders. And here in Taurus, it can be very mundane, like the leadership of Israel or Ukraine or Belgium. And this is where we might be introduced already to the global economy per se, with less hidden things, with less hidden, oh, it's the conflict of this, it's the conflict of that. It's probably going to begin to be more like, well, all people in the world need so and so and so and so and so, okay? But with Pluto, we always need to look at what is hidden, because that is a form of power that can be hidden here. And in the name of, let's say, universal income, there is also a democide to supposedly support it, although it's no problem to support universal income. Simply, basically to support the values of will and consent, and not having children kidnapped, to all kinds of atrocities, and then we will not have guerrilla wars. And then when people can have planned parenting that they plan, it's going to probably be enough for them to want to raise maybe 1, 2 children, give them a lot of love. Some people would want more if they enjoy, like, pregnancy and labor, and some people will want Planned Parenthood or be child-free, and that usually works out way better than when the government tries to do something. But when it comes to using the need to have a basic level income that he can support you, or at least the resources, okay, land, house, whatnot, then that becomes a situation where washing can begin. Okay, so there is greenwashing, there is feminist washing, which we've seen, very clearly in the 2 months that it took to recall. And why the 2 months is because there are ladies in Harvard and other Ivy League places Nothing to do with Ivy of Beyonce, nothing to do with her. Ivy League is the university. That for some reasons we don't know how they got into this situation. Are they kidnapped and threatened, or is it really their opinion that they think that if you liberate from, let's say, colonialism, then it's okay to rape women, to behead babies, to like that it's okay in the name of liberation. And we understand that some of these women probably are members of the UN, so it took the UN a lot of time to acknowledge what was the ritual sacrifice that was done in 7th of October. And it doesn't matter which political side are you of. Hopefully, in the spirit of Aquarius, we can all understand that ritual sacrifice of babies, of children, of people is not, it's not, it's an abuse of ritual. It's not ritual abuse, it's an abuse of ritual. But then maybe, it is in the spirit of Aquarius. It's kind of like thinking, oh, we have one thing that we can agree upon, and many people don't think this way. And this is the conflict that we have, the conflict of leadership versus the global power. And this global power, it's going to give a mask of humanitarianism, okay? Universal income, yes, but we forgot to mention we're going to do a democide instead, okay? And it's putting the world in a 22 catch where they feel like, oh, in order to resist this, we must make money ourselves. But where is Chiron? It's in Aries, here conjunct in Venus. And Chiron in Aries is basically a wound around your ability to do something by yourself. It is ruled by Mars. And for everything that you do by yourself, when you want to say, I am, you need to fund it. And Chiron is the wound in being able to do so. Okay, this is also why these things are happening with Chiron is in Aries. Why are these changes? They're being elected. So people will find it difficult to say, I am, and fund this statement. Okay, because if you were hurt at war, whether physically and emotionally or just witnessed war and you're suffering trauma, then the ability to make an income and to be self-reliant is also damaged. Yes, and if not, then you are going to be this kind of cold fish that are like, what does it matter? Work and it's like, okay, fine, like you're Hitler, Beseder, then you survived the Holocaust and you became a Hitler. But other than that, it touches on the wound of ableism. And it is in that time where people are experiencing difficulty to say I am, that it seems like a 22 catch, where now we're going to put you in a situation where to resist what we have to say, you're going to have to work alone. Oh, you cannot. Why you cannot? Because you bought the idea that you will always be able to work, that you will always be able to make an income, that you will never need to rely on anybody, that you will always be able to self-sustain. You did not create mechanisms or culture that supports both your individuality and your ability to still be able to rest, be able to recover, be able to support each other if something is needed to be supported. And now you have no idea of those things because you don't have a culture. You don't have a culture of rest. Because in 300 years ago, when Pluto was just arriving in Aquarius, you bought your freedom by Arbeit macht frei. Okay, it's like if you couldn't work, you had to die. Eventually, when Pluto would be in Leo, there would be concentration camps and death camps, and people would pinch their cheeks. It doesn't, not only Jews. Many people were put in these camps. Anybody who resisted the regime, there were concentration camps and death camps in the United States. There are in 2023 for the homeless people. There are. Okay? And so people would pinch their cheeks to say, I can work, so that they will not be exterminated. And so what people did when Pluto, last time Pluto was in Aquarius, was we're gonna work hard and we're gonna make something by our own. Remember this Beyonce song for the Renaissance? Okay, I'm quitting the 9 to 5. I'm gonna create my own foundation. But we have a Chiron in Aries. Okay, we have a Chiron in Aries, where you've quit the 9 to 5, but let's say you've quit the 9 to 5 because you got abused. And now you recognize this abuse everywhere. You recognize it on the television, you recognize it on the news, you recognize it in the certain segments of the family, you recognize it when you date, you recognize it when you don't date. Okay? You've been scrutinized for being single. So women that are still in that situation are kind of looking at you. Why are you single? I don't know. Why are you in a relationship? I don't know. Maybe for good reasons, maybe not. Or if you live in a certain place, are you living here alone? Are you not living? If I'm not safe living here alone, how will I ever be safe with a man? Because if we cannot say to each other, well, that maybe we need to go to other ways and still both of us be okay, then how can we form something that is actually healthy, that's actually trust-based and love-based and connection-based, okay? So you see how this affects everything. And 300 years ago, we bought our freedom by working hard, and it seemed fair, but if you weren't able to work, you would just die. And so we gave up segments of humanity. We were basically preparing humanity for the concentration camps that we'll see during the Second World War, not only in Germany, but in the United States and in many other places. And that is what was, and that is what is right now, unfortunately. Okay, you get a person becoming sick or having a trauma way before the wars, and they would go, let's say they would get some fund from the welfare, they would be sick and so on, and then they would get rehabilitation. Okay, and so in the rehabilitation they put them in the same work conditions that got them to be traumatized and sick in the first place. So this is almost like a satire. Where we can look to other cultures, we can look to certain African cultures that have more community life, and see some of them maybe it's too restrictive, some of them perhaps more free, and how do we create this sense of community that allows us to sustain and grow and rest, because right now indeed we are facing like a democide, and this is where this square is opening. Okay, another thing can be what the leadership or the connection to the soil or the land, with Uranus still in Taurus and Jupiter there, versus the scientification of things. And we are told that science is what science not necessarily is. Saturn here is very much still in Pisces. So there can be things to do with medicine. This is scientific, this is not scientific. Or people, or people going to the doctor is saying, you need to take this and that and that and that and that pill. And they go to a naturopath and they take some other things. And some of it is useful, some of it maybe not useful. And so they don't go to this doctor ever again. But they paid for this doctor and they pay for medical insurance. Okay? Or if the government provides the insurance, then still we are eligible also to that connection. Well, we need to remember that there is a crisis here, and in the crisis can also be the other way around. So just as people can die in the conventional medicine, like we had in COVID, like we have with beta blockers, like we have with a lot of treatments to diabetes even, then on the other way around, there can be the people who say, okay, I can resolve this by myself, and they don't actually manage to, and then there is another crisis, okay, where people are not being allowed to try conventional medicine, and that is also difficult. But here there is something hidden. There's something that is birthing and takes 20 years to be in that birth, and it has to do with science. It has to do with some global agenda, and this is where there is a connection. Okay, leaders and people are in connection to the soil, to the ground, to their banks. Okay, and they don't want this. People say, oh, government does not want the banks to be taken away from it. And we used to speak about it as like digital coins, and we would think, oh, we will have the freedom to do commerce, but it's also pros and cons for everything. And then, oh, there is a global digital coin, and now the governments are fighting that. So that's another thing that can happen with this one. Now let's go to the trine. So what happens? This is my May 22, 2024. And we have the opening trine, where the sun is in 2 degrees Gemini and Pluto is in 2 degrees Aquarius. And so, in this situation, well, the moon will actually be going over this. Yes, as it perfects, it's going to square Pluto. The day before it perfects, it's going to square Pluto, and in conjunct the sun. And the day after, it's going to trine this one. So in here, Sun in Gemini, this is where, in terms of leadership, there is a pro-technology kind of stuff. We're going to see the Elon Musks of the world gaining benefit. It is a closing moon. It's still a growing moon, so they could be launching products, but it could be launching something to space as well, with Mars in Aries here, so something to Mars or something to space. They could be launching something, or if we talk about the 15-minute cities, so we could be seeing some advancement with those that the governments or the leaders advance. Okay, Sun is our leaders and our performers as well. This is where, our famous artists are going to have their shows at the 15-minute city center to open. And you understand that the art is being recruited to that too, whether you like it or not. If you want to get a job as an artist, which is also important, not be dissipating with AI. So you're being recruited. Okay. And so we're going to have these new centers open. So it's going to be, Gemini is the city. If Taurus is about the land, Gemini is the technology, the city, that's something that is very small, okay, where smaller apartments, going not too far to anywhere you need to go, and having the technology, or maybe you're having a sort of technology that helps you also if you need to do fitness or anything like that. Mercury here in Taurus, so technology around food and processed food, and that's going to be highly supported by data, by research, by science, and by whatever hidden and not so hidden agenda. It's going to have its pros and cons. It can mean that certain people that did not have housing might have housing. It's going to look like this, and they can be doing like that type of a thing. It's like, hey, we take care of these people that nobody took care of in the past, and so on and so forth. But then there is the risk of that not being the case, and what you see is instead, like what you've seen in Israel, the people from the villages evacuated into buildings in the cities. So buildings that were supposedly built for long-term rent, and instead of rent, there are suddenly people that were evacuated from big, huge houses, okay? Huge houses that each one had a couple of acres where they would do agriculture. 70% of the Israeli agriculture was in these villages that were considered like to protect from to protect the border, so to speak. Okay, so the houses were big, and the acres were. They said we live in heaven, and then there are bombings every now and then. So that was the situation, and then these people were put into these buildings. And of course, this is the easiest thing to do in Israel, where everybody says already, oh, they should not be living on this land, and so on and so forth. It's very easy to not have the world rising against putting some Israelis in some high buildings, okay, in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv and in Beersheba, and so on and so forth. So it's a very smart move by those people that have this agenda and have the entire world go, oh, hooray, hooray, they've been evacuated, hooray, hooray. They're going, to narrow land. In any way, they live on illegal land, and then, the next is your village. Because this is what is projected here. That can be a bit of the execution of that. Uranus is already approaching Algol. But still, Uranus is on the land of Taurus, so they can be like Ukraine, they can be like Israel, they can be like Belgium. And, they go with the villages first. And that's basically unfortunately, the situation. If you ask me about like the United States, I don't know, because Jupiter here is in 29 degrees of Taurus. Is it going to be something like, Jupiter is the ascendant of the United States? It's basically United States having business in those lines, like Ukraine, like Israel, the ascendant of the country in that region. But when will it be with like the south of America? I don't know. I don't know to delineate that. It can be around eclipses, the two eclipses of 2024 that kind of hit, from they kind of do like a zipper of the United States from the east and from the west. I think those are going to be about this type of thing happening in the United States, not only for the current homeless. And there is a big problem already because Americans cannot talk about the homeless concentration and death camps. So, yes. Now let's go to the opposition. And the opposition is going to be on July 23rd, 2024, with the Sun and Pluto from 0 degrees Aquarius and 0 degrees Leo. They have this opposition where that means to me, whatever was done with the leadership of countries regarding those, cities, the processed food, the social credit score, all those things. Now, with Pluto retrograde, the people get to take the power back. Okay? And the moon is also the moon goes over Deneb Gidi. So the people have a chance, they have like a day to kind of take the power back in some way, shape, or form. When there is a conflict, a fierce conflict between the leadership or kings, especially because we still have kings and queens in the world, okay? There's Agenda 2030, and then there are kingdoms. I think Norwegians still have a king. Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, okay, have a king. Morocco has a king. Jordan has a king. Okay, there's the royalty of Saudi yes, I think also Qatari, they also have kings. And so this is going to be problematic. Because this all global thingy, global this, global that, perhaps these kings were promised something that they're not getting. And now they are in conflict, and that allows the people to begin to take the power back. Okay? If Qatar and Schwab are in argumentation, and Qatar says, no, we will not provide weapons for your plans, then suddenly we don't have terror by Hamas. Then suddenly Israel doesn't have incentive to fight. Then suddenly there's like there's a piece that both Qatar and Schwab would need to explain to the world. Okay? And that allows the people to take the power back. First of all, to be aware. It's like, wait, what this thing is, Qatar is not funding, the Qatar is doing a weapon embargo on the West, and there is no longer Hamas activity. Okay? That's something that, and not just, I know the local, there are more like ISIS, like Boko Haram, and all of these things. Like, Qatar is doing embargo on the West, and Boko Haram is like, cannot do anything. Okay, so so we get this is a very interesting moment, July 23rd, around this, because we might be getting to see some hidden structures. And Saturn is also retrograde on the 18th degree. 18th can be to do with herbs, but also with poison. And there is something because somebody could be putting some embargo. Somebody could be having this argument. Somebody could be arguing with somebody. And with Saturn, we're going to look at what was done around the medicines. And does it work? Is it useful? Okay, what was done around the refugees? Does it work? Is it useful? Ships. Okay, there's also ships being like there are pirates. They're not pirates, but it's like attacking ships. Is it useful? Does it work? Okay, and stuff like that. There can be some sort of a nuclear crisis. I'm not saying like actually bombs dropping, but some sort of crazy stuff like this. And what we have a Mars in Gemini again. To mitigate this, of course, Mars in Gemini is not a highly mitigating force, but it's Mars in Gemini, so there can be a little bit of a civil war, of a civil conflict in the situation that can be relied upon by whomever to serve while this opposition is happening, to serve so that they can continue with the conflict and continue with like how are kings going to react to this, all the while the people, which is represented by the moon on the Nebalgidi, there can be crisis with water, there can be pollution to water as well, unfortunately. Yes, Jupiter is already in Gemini, so there can be pollution in water in the cities. And on the other hand, some people can have more access to actual medicine, or have more access to water, or to traveling, because people begin to take the power back and become aware. Okay, there's more things you saw. It's like, oh, Israel is doing a genocide, and look, nobody paid attention that Israel is Maui. All the ritual abuse, the ritual sacrifice, nobody paid attention, because it is easy to get the people to say, oh, finally justice is going to be done. We are standing with the Palestinians. The world is standing with the Palestinians, and then everything is executed within Israel. And where do you think these Palestinians are going to return to? Okay, some sort of a 15-minute city thing, those who will stay. And here we may get a glimpse of this occurring and affecting, especially, it can be especially Hamas, because Hamas has his ascendant in Pisces, and there's not much here happening in the Virgo, but Virgo, the ruler is in Leo. I don't know, but it can be more to do, like, I could be quite accurate with what I said about Hamas. Okay, we can have like a sudden ceasefire that comes out of nowhere, and that was eventually like a weapon embargo. So yeah. Now, if essentially do you expect this thing to last until July 2024, we are talking about Agenda 2030. Okay, this is not a conflict, it's not a war, it's not about one genocide or another. This is a democide. Okay, the desire to extinct most of humanity and then venture into space. Okay, it's not going to be working so correctly, and it's not going to yield the good aspects of where they're heading. But usually there are people who are also doing things in the wrong way and not just in the right way, whether they're not aware or they have some, traumas, and that they are not able to try this because they cannot form certain connections, and so on and so forth. Then we have September 22, 2024. This is Pluto's Sun trine. And in this cycle, this is 29th degree of Virgo with Pluto retrograde in 29th degree of Capricorn. Okay, still in September 2024, it's still going on Capricorn. And it's needed because the structures that Saturn govern in Capricorn, you think about the mountains. What are the mountains? We have the Everest, okay? We have the Himalayas. We have the in Geneva, some of the highest alpines. Okay, and you think about Pluto as making changes to the core of a mountain. It takes time. It took a lot of time for mountains to form. It takes a lot of time for mountains to disintegrate, and to transform into something else. So Pluto here is working very diligently, and now we meet this trine where the trine is coming from Virgo, with Mercury on the 22nd degree of Virgo. Okay, here is what I think can happen in this situation, because Mercury rules Virgo. Leaders use lethal herbs, lethal chemistry, that is in alignment with the kind of like falling and decay of the old order. And here is leaders, the Virgo, okay, the Virgo thingy. Yes, on a mundane level, it's very difficult to tell, because the way the map is going to look like by then is very different. So leaders of Virgo countries, leaders that are associated with Virgo, chemists, either act in a lethal way or can be, assassinated as well with this. And this is going to be under the guise of politics, I think. Yes. Saturn in Pisces, the 14th degree. Again, I know this axis from the Palestine versus Hamas. Okay, PLO versus Hamas. So it can be one of those that's either being assassinated or they try to assassinate, or even Palestine rises. And I don't remember who said, Abu Mazen. Okay, he said that when Palestine will rise as a country, then the people, then he said, I think he said Hamas will not have, the will not be the army. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Either he meant only Hamas will be the army and there will not be other organizations. Okay? If you remember the foundation of, let's say, the land of Israel, which is relatively new, then there was Lehi, Palmach, Haganah, all of these organizations. They were basically trying to get rulership, and they were fighting in between themselves until they formed the IDF, which is the army. So Yitzhak Rabin was from the Palmach, but then there was the enmities between the organizations. So if there will be like a foundation of Palestine, it's going to be a very puppet show because, like I said, there's democide. So they don't intend to keep this thing called countries in general. They don't intend us to have countries in general, with the pros and the cons of that. There can be a light form, and I was listening yesterday to Philip Filipov and Lada Duncheva about the 2026 bisextile. Finally, I found how it's called, bisextile, between Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. Okay, I was one of the first astrologers, at least the first that I saw that found this, and then people started talking about this later, or they were like scheduling their talks later, and they each and every one has such fascination. So Dan Waits was talking about this, and Ladin Shiva was talking about this, and this type of transits between outer planets, when they all meet, then they are used both by the washing. Okay, if we are using kind of like the most political term for it, is the washing. Okay, health washing, green washing, human rights washing, and so on and so forth. But there is also the genuine good use of it. There's the genuine good use of it. And so those things will be happening too. When it comes to the idea of, let's say, forming a country, then my prediction is that this will be used as washing, okay? So you won't actually have a new country, an independent country, but what you are going to have is this washing of a bubble that's going to be run by somebody else, okay? So that can be the destruction of Hamas, but it can also be that Hamas destroys others and kind of becomes like the IDF of Palestine. So that if that happens, my prediction is that would be washing either way, and it's not like is not coming from the people, for the people, by the people, as it should be at this point in time where Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto is in Aquarius is the sign of we, the people. We can blame government all we want when Pluto is in Capricorn. And here we still have governments to blame because it's on the 29th degree. But when Pluto goes into Aquarius, it's going to go from Aquarius. Aquarius is we the people. It's we the people. And we cannot blame any government. So there's one world government. Okay, there is one world government. Yes, absolutely. This is what it's being used, it's being planned. But it is not like we can blame this nation, this flag, that flag. Okay, we can blame more like the big organization, but we also have to think, what do we do? How do we help each other? Because to make it obsolete, we the people on a global level need to learn how to treat each other good. And we all have to learn something about how to treat each other good. Okay? So that is, and there are many elements of us as society where the government did something and the people thought this is okay, this is what should be done. Okay, where you had a person who would suddenly start talking about stuff that are going to happen in the next decade, and you say, oh my God, they don't accept help, they don't this, they don't that, and you cut all contact with him, you put him in isolation, and then the only help that you would offer is to try to hospitalize them against their wish, or to give them pills that are not helpful, and you would, but eventually they would use this pill to commit suicide, and that's it. And you lost this friend, you lost this colleague, you lost this person. And you were doing that, you, the people, not the government. Before the government began to do this to people, people were doing that to people. Why? Because they were listening to this scientist. The scientist says, the scientist knows, the scientist this, the scientist. You have a person in front of you that is speaking about things in language that's more difficult for you to understand, because maybe they have a 12th house transit in astrology. Okay, so for this particular one, it can be something to do with using either media or herbs or chemistry in lethal ways, or it can be assassination of media people, Virgo ascendants, judges as well, or something to do with the countries on a mundane level that are associated with this. But it's because of the 22nd degree. There can also be foundation of something. I noticed that they tend to elect foundations that are not so good for humanity, and this one is so. And the moon is going to conjunct Uranus and trine this aspect, so from Taurus. So it seems like, oh, this is an earth trine, but how should I say, I don't know about this. Maybe the people will rebel, but this rebellion will be very much in alignment with the leadership. It seems to me like the people might not considering, or it looks like the regime is standing in favor of the people, but I would not rely on that. Then we have the square, October 22, 2024, and the closing square with the Sun 29 degrees of Libra and Pluto in 29 degrees of Capricorn. And this is going to be in a T-square with Mars. It's supposed to be resolved kind of around where Aries is going to be. So I will put asteroids here because this is important. Yes, Aries is going to be retrograde in 24 degrees of Aries. This closing square that is a T-square with Mars in Cancer and the Moon in Cancer co-present. So the Moon trines Mercury and Saturn. Saturn's retrograde in Pisces, and Saturn is ruling Pluto. And here we have this tension again between the leadership of like international courts of law, or leadership to do with UN, or leadership in Switzerland, in conflict with the countries, with the hierarchy, with the secret societies. They're no longer cooperating. And the military, or it can be civil military, okay? With Mars Cancer, it can be the military of the nation or military of the people. And those are all in conflict. These three forces are all in conflict. And that is going to allow the moon, which is the people, to kind of connect with the deeper thinking, which is Mercury in Scorpio. And with this retrograde Saturn, be more informed, get a chance. Here is where the people get another chance to, it's not easy, but to regain consciousness, regain the awareness, um, and there can be a military that is of the people, that is actually confronting this Pluto and this Sun. We're supposed to be resolved somewhere around like Aries in Aries. Chiron is in 20 degrees, approaching the conjunction with Aries. Um, again, there is the challenge in this election is that it is genuinely difficult to assert yourself. It is genuinely difficult to say, I quit the 9 to 5, I'm going to create my own foundation, and then Beyonce can sing about it with The Rock, and everybody's cool. And she's meeting her emotional needs here with the silver and the moon. But the people can't do what Beyonce can do. And again, I don't say that she's aware of that. But the people can't work like Beyonce can work. They can't do what Beyonce can do. They don't really have the means to sustain through this. And that leads to a certain situation where just to understand that in the new society that we are building, it should be a place where people can rest, where people can recover, where people do recognize the spirit and matter aspect of things. So that we progress, okay? We no longer do child sacrifice or people sacrifice or other things that were practiced among humanity, okay? Or cannibalism that were practiced among humanity. But we can replace that with willing consent, with the divergence in gender that does not having to rely on operation, okay? Some people need operation, but most people don't, okay? The gender category is so vast, most people genuinely don't, or at least a lot of people genuinely don't. And maintain biodiversity rather than to have bloodline segregation. Okay, so we can take from what was happening in the tribe, see what was the good thing and what advancements do we need, and that makes the oppression of like 2030 obsolete. That makes oppression obsolete, because if we don't separate ourselves with bloodline segregation, if we practice will and consent, okay, if we allow ourselves a time to rest and a time to work, if we allow ourselves a time to really recover, if we acknowledge, if we understand that the person that's not waking up to work is not lazy, okay, if for me, if I think about, I don't know, right now we have this thing with agriculture, so to pick up fruits from the tree and see, it's fun, it's children's play. It is fun. Now, when it's not industrialized, then it is fun and it is interesting. So you do a little bit of that, then a little bit of that, and maybe if you don't like so much to do that, then you go through it and it's not that difficult. Or alternatively, you have more like somebody can help you with that, and you can help them with something that they don't like to do so much. So there is a more getting alongness that allows for ability to work, okay? But industrialized society, by design, does not allow people to work. And industrialized society is basically where we were introduced to robots, we're introduced to production line, and the technology very likely existed to be doing way more than was done. And the compromise that we had was that people will be working in conditions that basically no longer keep them healthy. and interested. It's the same job, okay? If you can pick up fruits from the tree, and you can do it with joy and have a time to rest or to gain, or it can be like a challenge. Today I did 2 trees, tomorrow I did 5 trees, and go with your competitive style. And then you can have like various trees going. So one is orange, one is tomatoes. Okay, tomatoes is not a tree. One is, I don't know, a pomegranate. And you get these changes happening. So you get the challenge and the diverse and the fruits, and you get to eat from the fruits. And then you have a party and everybody's dancing and so on and so forth. Now it's interesting, but if you have to work even 4 hours, and you see this line of trees, now you pick up the fruits like a robot. Of course, this is making people verrückt. Okay, it's making people crazy. Yes. And now I'm trying to relook at this thing, and perhaps here maybe the people will understand this. I'm not sure why so much. There is Uranus here that is retrograde on the 26th degree of Taurus. So Uranus could be perhaps about rejuvenation, or refreshing the idea of what is labor in agriculture even. Or it's both about thinking, hey, why is this work not being done? Why is this work that used to be so interesting and challenging is now boring and monotonous? And then at the same time, there is also the acknowledgement that people do need to rest so that they can recover, and then they come to work with passion, and they miss people and so on. So usually people are not lazy. Okay? If they don't go to school, either they don't get along with some of the kids, or the teacher tells them you cannot do this, or the subject is really not being taught in an interesting way to them, and that's why they don't go to school. Okay, either they're being threatened, or they're just being bored, or they're being told by the teacher, you will never amount to this, you will never amount to that. So they don't want to be this person again. They don't want to do this. Then they will rebel, or they will be sick, or they will be, okay? But laziness is not something that actually occurs in life, because people were not designed to not be interested in this existence. Yes? So perhaps this is where the people begin to refresh the ideas, to refresh and to kind of think, oh wait, that which I expected myself to do, I was basically still living on the expectation of industrialized society while trying to recreate something else. And that is the closing square. And then we have the sextile. Oh, we didn't talk about the previous sextiles, but now we have the closing sextile. And this is 0 degrees Scorpio with 0 degrees Aquarius. And opposing this Uranus on retrograde on Algol. Okay, this one, even it is a sextile between the Sun and Pluto, but this Uranus, now this Uranus does trine Pluto, and the Sun trines Neptune, and yet this is a Uranus on Algol retrograde, with Sun in 0 degrees Sagittarius. Yes, sorry. So I'm just more concerned about this Uranus and the opposition to the Sun. Yes, it definitely is a time to call on Algol, to call on Medusa Gorgon to work with her wisdom, and to pray a lot. And the moon is in the sign of the Sun, okay, in 16 degrees Leo, as this perfects. So the sextile between the Sun and Pluto is not so much the concern. Here the aspiration for freedom and this supposed control or the philosophy of the leaders and the agenda of Pluto, they complement each other, but there is a rebellion, and and with Algol it can be quite okay, and this can be kings being outthrown as well. And Jupiter, the ruler of the sun, is in 18 degrees retrograde in Gemini. I'm not sure who or what, but this could be on a mundane level is of the significations that can be rebellion, to do with ritual, to do with all these things that we don't want to have happening in the world. But this is definitely want to call for like the magical intervention and to the spiritual aspect of things. So I will make a break here, and I will release this synodic cycle of Pluto and the Sun for 2024. Yes, so all in all, this is a cycle that at 2024, for like the closing sextile, and it will, and the cycle will renew itself in 2025 already. The conjunction, the closing conjunction. This is, well, we open with the conjunction, and then the next conjunction is going to be in 2025. This is where the question is, what will be the power of those who instigate the 2030 changes versus the power of the kings and the queens of the world, versus the power of the people? Okay, the people really need to understand that they need to tend to CPTSD better than anybody else. Because right now, everybody else tended to this better than the people. If you go to work, you cannot work. Why? You're lazy. And they don't know what terror have this person been through, okay? Or felt in the aura. Or go to give labor, okay? What's the problem? Everybody brings babies. Yes, this type of approach. Or you think about things in normal society. It's like everybody is doing so. Where is the problem? Why don't you get married? Why don't you this? Why don't you that? When will you have children? Why don't you have children? Why did you bring a child when you cannot take care of the child? Okay? We need to tend to our people better than anybody else, because this is when a person begins to say, maybe I will go to psychologist. This is where the social welfare, social worker comes in. People call her, okay? This is where, oh, the doctor must be right, you must be crazy, yes, okay? This is, yes, they are lazy, they are this, they are that, maybe they need to work at some, I don't know, place where they don't make a lot of money and they have to work in order to sustain themselves, so this call is rehabilitation, okay? This is what people do to people, eventually. And it's we, the people, that need to grow out of it ourselves. Because this is not, if we are going to do it like 300 years ago, this is not America. This is not America anymore. No USA today. It's not going to be working. It's a global movement to mass extinguish people and go to Mars. That's it. End of experiment. Alternatively, the people begin to tend to the people, and they're going to have a lot of chances, unfortunately. Many refugees, many traumatized people, many people who go through many things, many people who suddenly cannot work, maybe many people who work but cannot have access to the economy, many such things. And this is with all, we need to be compassionate, but also we must do to the people who are marginalized in society better than anybody else, because this is how we win this game. It's not by working harder than the most, it's not by hustle culture, it's not by creating an industrialized agriculture. And when I mean industrialized, I mean the production line, okay? It's not a bad thing to have maybe something that helps you pick up the fruits, but this or that, but it's not, how shall I say it? You also remember that you enjoy to pick up the fruits. You should remember that as well. And when we are thinking, we understand that along history, tribes have been conquered where they were having bloodline segregation. You can't marry, well, not enough willing consent. Okay, it's not that there wasn't. Some places in Africa there was better willing consent than the West, and the West brought a lot of violence. Okay, but still, it's like we need to, what was good, we need to practice what is good. It's willing consent is very useful, very healthy for the hormonal system. And violating this creates such implications on the generations of society that is just, no child sacrifice. Okay, how did colonialism succeed? So because if the white person doesn't practice child sacrifice, at least not that you see, then you go with the white person. Okay, if they don't practice this thing, they don't sacrifice children. Oh, how did God connect with Abraham in the Yitzhak story, Abraham and the Yitzhak story? Well, basically told him, take your son, your only child, and sacrifice it. And Abraham did it because he said, well, the Lord is speaking to me. Some deities, some this, some that, and there were many deities. And he takes his son, he puts there, and then the Lord says, stop. Don't do this. If you want to sacrifice, maybe sacrifice an animal, but also eat from that sacrifice. Don't just slaughter an animal. And Abraham says, but then Abraham, okay, then what? Okay, I'm not going to, what about my body? Don't you want me to cut myself here, to cut myself? God says, God forbid, no. Why the fuck would I want that? And Abraham said, but something, I don't know, something. He said, okay, then this thing on your genitals, and you remove this, okay? He said, but this is not the behavior of that monotheistic God. It's not circumcision. When people say circumcision is not the brit with the God. Okay, it's man-made request to God, because Abraham found it difficult to believe. It's abomination that God was okay with, so that we won't make blood sacrifice. So the divine came in a new being, and he said, with this, no blood sacrifice. Then who will you go? But if we don't want all the things that we don't like about monotheism, okay, you believe in only me, jihad, this, that, okay, what we need to do, stop blood sacrifice. You do blood sacrifice? No. You do genitalia mutilation? No. You practice violation of willing consent? God forbid, no. Okay, your God is okay, no problem. What is your God? Let's learn more about him, or her, or them. Because surely we have to teach each other things. And this is how, when Nelson Mandela abolished apartheid, he abolished bloodline segregation. You could be elected. You don't have to be king of this specific bloodline. He was of a royal family, but not of the bloodline, of the same bloodline, but not the specific subtype of a bloodline. You see how racist this is? That he couldn't be a king. And then not only he stood up to the king, and he inherited that from his father, so it was something good about that bloodline as well. You have to make a little bit of joke. And so he stood up to the king, and he abolished bloodline segregation so you can be elected, and he married a woman from another tribe. How can you justify apartheid if people don't do this to themselves? How can you justify this? You say, how can you justify it? You know, it becomes obsolete. Because you would, in order to integrate in the society of Africans, as a colonizer, now you would need to adhere to democracy. And they said, bye-bye, we don't do this. We're done educating you. Ciao. Some of them, well, Elon Musk did grow for, with, I think, a family that had a coal mine in South Africa. But we need to remember the story of Mandela when we come to deal with Agenda 2030, because it is all these things that we do as people to people. You think about, why do some people want a country, let's say, certain countries out of the map? It's not just the case of Israel. And some other thing about Afghanistan. Yes, Afghanistan now is ruled by Taliban, is not respectful of women's freedom. Okay, why would Westerners be supportive of such a thing? Because what they cannot do in the West, they travel. They do in Thailand, they do in India, yeah, they do, maybe in Afghanistan, and then they say we support the economy. Yes, and so it's interest. That's how colonialism worked. It was the interest to make slaves of people, because with them you don't have to practice will and consent. Yeah. It's not healthy for you to not buy. You say yes, because smoking is not healthy for you too. Drink is not healthy for you too. Okay, but we don't address the actual things. And when it builds up, then people have already like dissociations and stuff like that. But eventually, if we as society want to abolish this 2030 thingy, so to make it obsolete, we must learn to identify what is in our habits, in our society, that is in alignment with those things that were oppressive towards us, eventually as people. And we stop doing those things, or we tend to stop doing those things. I'm not saying easy, because there is Chiron in Aries, yes? And then oppression becomes obsolete. A great planetary help with this is Procyon. Procyon is just this one. Okay, Nelson Mandela had a son on Procyon. So Procyon and Algol are going to be quite important for this synodic cycle, so that the people can begin to understand that before there was oppressive government, there were people that thought that this person must be lazy, and this person, they must be, I don't know, if they're lying or something like this, they must be just a liar, and nobody understands what's behind this. Maybe they went through some sort of trauma and they couldn't do things the usual ways, they had to go around. Okay, and you see that in societies where a lot of this is happening, then these societies, they gain freedom, they gain, of course, it's not the fault of a society if it is oppressed, and it is also a learning process where the more we understand, it's like, oh, that was not contributing, or that was not contributing to our lives. And it's tricky because it seems that the values of hard work, of entrepreneurship, of bravery, they're very good values, but because we are dealing with Chiron in Aries, then there is the wound around asserting that. And we also have to take into account that our founders are veterans of violence. Okay, they were survivors of violence, and they're dealing with the things that, and every person experiences it differently. that affects the ability to fight, that affects the ability to work, that affects many things. And it is by either tending to that and getting that, or alternatively, there is the demo side. Okay, there's basically human sacrifice in order so that humanity will supposedly advance. But is it advancing to sacrifice humans? Okay, so this is the end of this synodic cycle.